The most feared man in the city had dozens of guards protecting his family, but the person who saved his mother was the one nobody even noticed. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alexander Kim. The sound of a glass shattering was the moment everything changed. Inside one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, surrounded by luxury, wealth, and powerful names, everyone knew who was sitting at the center table. Alexander Kim, the Korean Mafia boss whose name could silence an entire room. A man known for his control, his intelligence, and the cold expression that never revealed what he was thinking. Men feared him. Enemies avoided him. Even those who worked for him knew one simple rule: never make Alexander Kim lose control. But that evening, there was only one person in the world who mattered more than his empire. His mother. Eleanor Kim sat across from him, smiling softly as she looked at the man her son had become. "You work too hard," she said gently. Alexander glanced down at his glass. "I have responsibilities." She smiled. "You always say that." For a moment, the powerful mafia leader looked less like a feared businessman and more like the little boy his mother had raised alone. She was the only person who knew the man behind the reputation. The only person who could remind him that there was still something human beneath all the power. But neither of them noticed the stranger entering the restaurant. Not at first. The man moved slowly. Too slowly. His eyes stayed fixed on Eleanor. Alexander noticed. Years of survival had trained him to recognize danger before it arrived. His expression changed. His guards reacted instantly. But they were too late. The stranger reached inside his coat, and a flash of silver reflected beneath the restaurant lights. A knife, aimed directly at Eleanor Kim. The entire room froze. Guests stopped talking. Waiters stopped moving. Security reached for their weapons. But before anyone could take a single step, someone else moved. Sophia Carter, a black waitress carrying a tray near the table. She was not a bodyguard. She was not part of Alexander's world. She was simply a woman doing her job. A woman most people in that restaurant had ignored all night. But Sophia saw something everyone else missed. An elderly woman in danger. And she didn't think about money. She didn't think about power. She didn't think about who Eleanor Kim really was. She only saw someone who needed help. Her tray fell to the floor. The sound echoed through the silent room. Then she ran. 1 second. One choice. One moment that would change two completely different worlds forever. Sophia stepped between the knife and Eleanor. The impact shocked everyone. Alexander stood frozen. The man who had faced enemies, betrayal, and violence without fear suddenly couldn't move. Because the person standing in front of his mother was not one of his soldiers. Not one of his allies. It was a waitress. A woman with nothing to gain. As Sophia fell, Alexander rushed forward. For the first time in years, fear appeared in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for someone else. And as the entire restaurant held its breath, Alexander Kim looked at the woman who had just risked everything for his family. He had one question burning in his mind. Why would someone with nothing risk her life for a stranger? The answer would change everything he believed about loyalty, power, and the people who truly mattered. The room went silent. Everyone in that restaurant remembered the woman who took the knife, but nobody knew the story of the waitress who had been invisible her entire life. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Sophia Carter. Long before the night that changed everything, Sophia Carter was someone people looked through instead of looked at. Every morning, before the city was fully awake, Sophia tied her curly hair into a neat high ponytail, adjusted her cream-colored tie, and stepped into Bella Vista restaurant with the same quiet determination. The elegant dining room was filled with crystal glasses, expensive suits, and people who never worried about the price of anything. But Sophia knew her place in that world. At least, that was what everyone kept reminding her. She was the waitress. The person who carried their drinks. The person who cleaned their tables. The person who disappeared the moment important conversations began. Some guests never learned her name. Some never even looked at her face. They saw the uniform before they saw the person wearing it. But Sophia had learned something years ago. Your value was not decided by the way people treated you. It was decided by who you chose to become. That was why she never stopped being kind. Even when customers complained for no reason. Even when wealthy guests snapped their fingers to call her over. Even when people acted like her job made her less important. Sophia still smiled, still helped, still cared. And that was how Eleanor Kim noticed her. The first time Eleanor visited the restaurant, Sophia saw something nobody else saw. Not a wealthy woman. Not the mother of one of the most feared men in the city. Just an older woman sitting alone. A woman who looked strong on the outside but carried a quiet sadness behind her eyes. When Eleanor accidentally dropped her handbag, several people walked past. Sophia was the only one who stopped. "Are you all right, ma'am?" It was a simple question, but Eleanor remembered it. Because Sophia asked it without knowing her name, without knowing her power, without expecting anything in return. Over time, small moments created an unexpected connection between them. Sophia remembered that Eleanor preferred tea instead of coffee. She noticed when Eleanor looked tired. She always made sure the older woman had a comfortable seat away from crowded areas. And Eleanor slowly discovered the truth about Sophia. The young waitress was working extra shifts to help her family. She gave up her own comfort to help others. She carried struggles she never talked about. "You have a rare heart," Eleanor once told her. Sophia smiled gently. "I just know what it feels like when nobody notices you." Those words stayed with Eleanor because she understood them. She knew what it meant to live in a world where people only saw your position, your name, or what you could provide. And perhaps that was why she trusted Sophia. Because unlike everyone else around her son, Sophia never looked at power. She looked at people. What Sophia didn't know was that her kindness had already reached the one person who trusted no one. Alexander Kim. The man who believed everyone had a hidden reason. The man who believed loyalty could always be bought. Soon, he would discover the truth about the woman his world ignored. And when he did, everything he believed about trust would begin to fall apart. The room went silent. Alexander Kim had spent years learning how to recognize enemies. But he never expected the person who challenged his beliefs would be a woman who had never wanted anything from him. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alexander Kim. Long before people feared his name, Alexander Kim was just a child watching his mother fight to keep their family alive. He remembered the small apartment, the cold nights, the empty refrigerator, and Eleanor Kim coming home after working long hours, still finding the strength to smile at him. She was not powerful then. She had no influence, no security, no one to protect her. But she protected him. Every sacrifice she made became a reason for Alexander to keep moving forward. He promised himself one thing. No one would ever hurt his family again. That promise followed him into adulthood. But the world he entered was not kind. After losing his father, Alexander discovered that trust was dangerous. People smiled while planning betrayal. Partners became enemies. Friends became threats. Every mistake cost someone their life. So Alexander adapted. He became colder, smarter, more careful. He built an empire where nobody dared challenge him. The city knew him as the Korean Mafia Boss. A man whose calm voice could be more frightening than a weapon. A man who never showed weakness. But what nobody knew was that Alexander's greatest fear was not losing power. It was losing the last person who truly loved him. His mother. That was why he surrounded Eleanor with protection. Security teams. Constant monitoring. People who would risk their lives because Alexander demanded it. But despite all his power, there was one thing he never understood. Loyalty. He believed people stayed because they needed something. Money. Protection. Status. Everyone had a reason. Everyone had a price. That belief was why Sophia Carter confused him. After the attack, Alexander ordered his people to investigate every detail about her. He expected to find something hidden. A secret connection. A personal motive. A reason behind her actions. Because in his world, nobody did anything without expecting something in return. But the report on Sophia Carter left him silent. No criminal history. No hidden agenda. No connection to his enemies. Only a life filled with quiet sacrifices. She worked multiple jobs. She helped people who could never repay her. She gave kindness even when life had given her every reason to become bitter. Alexander stared at the file for a long time. For the first time in years, he had found something he could not explain. A person who had nothing, yet gave everything. Later that night, Alexander stood outside his mother's hospital room. Through the glass, he saw Sophia sitting beside Eleanor. Her shoulder was injured. Her own life had been changed forever. Yet she was still asking if his mother was comfortable, still making sure she was okay. Not because Alexander was watching, not because anyone would reward her, just because that was who she was. And standing there in silence, Alexander Kim felt something he had forgotten existed. A question, a doubt, a feeling that perhaps the world was not as simple as he believed. Maybe not everyone had a price. Maybe some people were valuable because they could never be bought. The room went silent. The most dangerous moment of Alexander Kim's life was not when an enemy pointed a weapon at him. It was when someone else was willing to die for the person he loved most. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alexander Kim. The night of the attack was supposed to be a peaceful evening. For once, Alexander Kim had stepped away from business. No negotiations, no threats, no enemies waiting in the shadows. Just dinner with his mother. Eleanor Kim had always been the one person who could pull him away from the darkness surrounding his life. She knew the man behind the reputation, the son behind the title, the person Alexander had buried beneath years of power and violence. But while everyone inside Bella Vista restaurant saw a powerful family enjoying a quiet evening, danger was already moving closer. Alexander noticed it first. A man near the entrance. A movement that didn't belong. A silence that felt wrong. His instincts, built from years of surviving the most dangerous situations, immediately warned him. Something was coming. His eyes locked onto the stranger. And in that single moment, everything slowed down. The man reached inside his coat. Alexander's body reacted. His guards moved. But not fast enough. A silver blade appeared beneath the warm restaurant lights. And it was aimed directly at Eleanor. "Mom!" Alexander's voice broke through the room. The sound shocked everyone, because they had never heard fear in his voice before. Not from the man who had faced enemies without blinking. Not from the man who made others tremble. But before his guards could reach the attacker, another person saw what was happening. Sophia Carter, the waitress everyone ignored. The woman standing near the table with a tray in her hands. She saw Eleanor. She saw the knife. And she moved. There was no calculation. No thought of consequences. No understanding of who Eleanor Kim really was. Sophia did not see the mother of a mafia boss. She saw an elderly woman in danger. The tray slipped from her hands. Glass shattered across the floor. The entire restaurant turned toward the sound. Then Sophia ran. 1 step. 2 steps. A lifetime of choices leading to one impossible moment. She reached Eleanor just as the attacker moved forward. And she placed herself between them. The impact changed everything. The restaurant became completely silent. People who had spent the evening judging Sophia's position, her uniform, and her place in their world now watched her do something none of them expected. She protected someone more powerful than anyone in that room. Without hesitation, without asking for anything, Alexander stood frozen. His guards surrounded him. His enemies had tried to break him before, but nothing had prepared him for this. A woman with no weapon, no security, no power, had shown more courage in 1 second than most people showed in a lifetime. He rushed forward. For a moment, the world around him disappeared. The only thing he saw was Sophia, the waitress who had always been invisible, the woman who had just risked everything for his family. And as Alexander looked into her eyes, he realized something that disturbed him more than any enemy ever had. The person he trusted the least was the one person who had given him a reason to trust again. The room went silent. Alexander Kim had spent his entire life searching for hidden intentions behind every action. But the truth about Sophia Carter was the one thing he never expected to find. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alexander Kim. For 3 days, Alexander stayed at the hospital. 3 days surrounded by doctors, security teams, and people waiting for his orders. But none of them understood why the most powerful man in the city refused to leave one simple hospital room. Because inside that room was the woman who had changed something inside him. Sophia Carter, the waitress who had taken a knife meant for his mother. The woman who had nothing to gain and nothing to prove. Alexander had spent his entire life studying people. He knew how to recognize lies. He knew how to identify hidden motives. In his world, kindness was often a disguise. A smile could hide betrayal. A favor could become a weapon. That was why he couldn't accept Sophia's actions. There had to be a reason. There had to be something she wanted. So Alexander did what he always did. He investigated. The report arrived on his desk the next morning. A simple folder. A simple name. Sophia Carter. But the information inside was anything but simple. 28 years old. No criminal record. No connection to rival organizations. No history of manipulation. Just a woman who worked harder than most people around her. Alexander continued reading. And slowly, his expression changed. Sophia had spent years helping others. She worked extra shifts to support her family. She quietly paid for groceries when an elderly neighbor was struggling. She stayed late to comfort a coworker going through a difficult time. She gave pieces of herself away even when she had very little left. Alexander looked down at the pages. It made no sense. In his world, people protected what benefited them. But Sophia protected people who could offer her nothing. Then he found something that made him stop. A few months before the attack, Eleanor Kim had collapsed outside a pharmacy. No guards. No assistants. No one knew who she was. She was just an elderly woman who needed help. And the person who stayed beside her until help arrived was Sophia Carter. She never asked for a reward. Never asked for her name. Never asked for anything. Alexander slowly closed the file. His mother had already known the woman he was trying to understand. That evening, he entered Eleanor's hospital room. She looked at him and smiled. You found out about her. Alexander stayed quiet. Why did you trust her? Eleanor looked toward the window. Because she saw me before she saw my name. Those words followed him. Because Alexander realized something painful. Everyone in his life knew his name, his power, his reputation. But Sophia had seen something different. She saw people, not titles, not wealth, not fear. Later that night, Alexander returned to Sophia's room. She was awake, looking at the city lights. You should be resting, he said. Sophia smiled softly. So should you. For a moment, Alexander almost forgot who he was. Nobody spoke to him like that. Nobody reminded him that he was human, except her. And standing there beside the woman who had risked everything for his family, Alexander Kim finally understood the truth. Sophia Carter was not dangerous because she saved his mother. She was dangerous because she was slowly destroying the walls he built around his heart. The room went silent. Alexander Kim had spent his entire life believing trust was something people earned through loyalty. But Sophia Carter was about to prove that the rarest kind of loyalty was the kind that asked for nothing in return. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alexander Kim. The hospital room was quiet that evening. The city outside continued moving. Cars filled the streets. People rushed through their lives. But inside that room, everything felt different. Alexander Kim sat across from Sophia Carter, a man who was used to controlling every conversation, every negotiation, every outcome. Yet somehow, he found himself searching for the right words. That had never happened before. Sophia looked at him calmly. She wasn't intimidated by his reputation. She wasn't impressed by his wealth. She simply saw a tired man sitting in front of her. Why did you do it? Alexander finally asked. Sophia looked confused. Do what? Save my mother. The question carried more weight than he expected. Because Alexander was not asking about the attack. He was asking about something deeper. Why would someone risk their life for a person they barely knew? Why would someone step into danger without knowing what they would receive in return? Sophia looked down for a moment. Then she answered quietly. Because she needed help. Alexander remained silent. That's it, he asked. Sophia looked back at him. That's enough. Those two words stayed in the air. Because Alexander had spent his entire life believing everything came with a reason. A deal. A condition. A hidden purpose. But Sophia's answer had no calculation behind it. No expectation. No request. Just humanity. For the first time in years, Alexander didn't know what to say. You knew who I was, he said. Sophia nodded. Everyone knows who you are. And you still helped her? Yes. Why? Sophia paused. Then she said something that would stay with him forever. Because your mother was a person before she was powerful. The room became silent. Alexander looked away. Those words reached a place inside him that nobody had touched in years. Because somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that. He had spent so much time protecting his family name that he stopped seeing the people behind it. Later that week, Alexander invited Sophia to his private office. She expected the worst. She thought maybe he wanted to thank her, maybe offer money, maybe arrange security, something powerful people usually did when they wanted to repay a debt. But Alexander did something unexpected. He asked her to sit, not across from him as an employee, beside him as someone whose opinion mattered. I had my people investigate you, he admitted. Sophia smiled slightly. I figured. You're not angry? No, why? Because you're used to protecting yourself. The answer surprised him. Because she wasn't judging him. She understood him. Alexander looked at the woman sitting beside him. The woman who wore a simple uniform, but carried more strength than most powerful people he knew. I thought everyone had a price, he said quietly. Sophia didn't respond. She just listened. And then you appeared. For a moment, the cold expression everyone feared disappeared. I don't understand you. Sophia smiled softly. You don't have to understand everything to know when something is right. Alexander looked at her, and for the first time in his life, he wondered if the strongest person in the room was not the person with the most power. Maybe it was the person who still had kindness after everything life had taken from them. The room went silent. Everyone in Alexander Kim's world believed power was inherited, earned, or taken, but nobody expected the most powerful man in the city to choose a woman they considered beneath him. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alexander Kim. The rumors started before Alexander even announced anything. A waitress. That was the word people repeated. Not Sophia Carter. Not the woman who saved Eleanor Kim's life. Not the person who showed more courage in 1 second than many powerful people showed in a lifetime. Just a waitress. Inside the Kim family mansion, powerful figures gathered around a long marble table. Men who had worked beside Alexander for years. People who had built their lives around his decisions. But tonight, they were not discussing business. They were discussing Sophia. She doesn't belong here. The voice came from Richard Lee, one of Alexander's oldest advisors. His expression remained cold. She has no background, no influence, no understanding of this world. The room stayed silent. Everyone knew what he meant. Sophia was not one of them. She was not born into wealth. She did not have a powerful family. She did not have an army protecting her. She was simply a woman who served food at a restaurant. Richard leaned forward. You are risking your reputation for someone who was only doing her job. Alexander sat at the head of the table. For years, he had allowed people to speak about loyalty, power, and respect. But tonight, something was different. Because they were speaking about the one person who had shown those values without asking for anything. She wasn't doing her job, Alexander said. The room became quiet. Richard looked confused. She made a choice. Those words changed the atmosphere. Because everyone understood the difference. A job could be abandoned. A contract could be broken. But a choice revealed who someone truly was. Alexander remembered that night. The knife. The fear in his mother's eyes. The moment Sophia stepped forward without hesitation. She had no reason to protect Eleanor. No connection. No reward. But she did it anyway. She protected my family when people with power stood still. Alexander continued. Nobody spoke. Because they knew he was right. The same people questioning Sophia had spent their lives protecting their own interests. But Sophia protected someone because it was the right thing to do. Later that evening, Alexander visited Sophia. She was standing near the window of her apartment, looking at the city lights. When she saw him, she immediately understood. They don't accept me, she said softly. Alexander remained silent. Because she was right. The world he came from judged people by names, money, and influence. But he was beginning to realize something. Sophia had never needed his world to prove her worth. She already had it. I spent my whole life believing power was everything, Alexander finally said. Sophia looked at him. And now, he took a slow breath. Now I know power means nothing if you lose the people who remind you who you are. The silence between them felt different. Not distant. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Alexander stepped closer. For the first time, the man everyone feared looked uncertain. Not because he was facing an enemy, but because he was about to make a decision that would change his entire life. The next words he spoke would shock everyone who believed they knew Alexander Kim. The room went silent. Everyone expected Sophia Carter to enter Alexander Kim's world and change herself to survive, but nobody expected her kindness to change the entire empire around her. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Sophia Carter. The world reacted exactly the way Alexander expected. With disbelief, with criticism, with judgment. When people heard that Alexander Kim had chosen Sophia Carter, the woman who once served tables at a luxury restaurant, they could not understand it. They saw her uniform. They saw her past. They saw where she came from. And they decided she did not belong. But they never saw what Alexander saw. They never saw the woman who stayed beside his mother when nobody else was there. They never saw the person who gave kindness without expecting anything back. They never saw the strength behind her quiet smile. The wedding was not what everyone imagined. There were no unnecessary displays of power, no attempt to prove Alexander's influence, no moment where Sophia was presented as a possession. Because Alexander wanted the world to understand one thing. She was not beside him because he allowed it. She was beside him because she chose to be, and because he respected her. For the first time in his life, Alexander Kim did not stand above someone. He stood beside them. Eleanor Kim noticed the change immediately. She watched her son during the ceremony. The same man who once believed emotions were weaknesses, the same man who built walls around his heart, now looked at someone with peace in his eyes. "You finally understand," Eleanor told him later. Alexander looked at his mother. "Understand what? That the strongest people are not always the ones who control others." Her voice softened. "Sometimes they are the ones who know how to care." Those words stayed with him. Because Sophia had never tried to change Alexander through force. She never demanded he become someone else. She simply showed him another way to live. And slowly, the Kim empire began to change. Not overnight. Not through dramatic promises. Through small decisions. Employees who once felt invisible started being heard. Workers who were afraid to speak finally had someone listening. People who had always been treated as numbers were treated like human beings. Everyone noticed. The same man who once measured everything by power was now asking different questions. How will this affect the people who depend on us? What happens to those who have no voice? The answer was always connected to the woman who changed him. Sophia. One evening, Alexander watched her speaking with a young employee who looked nervous. She listened patiently. She treated him with respect. She made him feel important. And Alexander smiled quietly. Because that was what made Sophia different. Even after entering a world of wealth, danger, and influence, she never forgot what it felt like to be ignored. Later that night, Sophia found Alexander standing near the balcony. The city lights reflected across his face. "You're thinking again," she said. A small smile appeared on his lips. "I spent my whole life building an empire." Sophia looked at him. "And now?" Alexander reached for her hand. "Now I want to build something worth protecting." For the first time, Alexander Kim was not protecting a reputation, not a title, not a legacy. He was protecting the person who reminded him that he was still human. The room went silent. The world once saw Sophia Carter as a woman who served people at their tables, but years later, they would see her as the person who changed the heart of the most feared man in the city. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Sophia Carter and Alexander Kim. Months had passed since the night that changed everything. The night when a black waitress stepped forward while everyone else stood still. The night when Alexander Kim discovered that courage was not measured by power. It was measured by choice. But not everyone accepted the change. There were still people who remembered Sophia's past. They remembered the uniform. They remembered the restaurant. They remembered the woman they once believed was invisible. But Sophia never tried to erase where she came from. Because she knew something Alexander had learned too. A person's worth was never decided by where they started. It was decided by who they chose to become. At a charity event hosted by the Kim Foundation, Sophia walked into a room filled with the same type of people who once looked down on her. Business owners, influential families, people who had spent their lives measuring others by status. But this time, something was different. Sophia did not enter behind Alexander. She did not stand in his shadow. She walked beside him, and everyone noticed. Across the room, an older guest who had once ignored Sophia watched her carefully. She expected arrogance. She expected someone who had gained power and forgotten her past. But instead, she saw Sophia kneeling beside an elderly woman, listening patiently as she spoke. No cameras, no audience, no reason to pretend. Sophia was still the same person. The same woman who stopped for someone in need. The same woman who cared when nobody was watching. And that was when people finally understood. Alexander Kim did not choose Sophia because she needed his protection. He chose her because she reminded him of something he had lost. His humanity. Later that evening, Alexander stood outside on the balcony of their home. The city stretched beneath them. The same city that once feared his name. The same city that knew him as a man who could destroy anyone who challenged him. Sophia walked beside him. "You're quiet," she said softly. Alexander smiled. "I was thinking about the person I used to be." She looked at him. "And who are you now?" For a moment, he looked toward the lights below. Then he answered honestly. "Someone who finally understands what matters." Sophia smiled. Because she knew the answer was true. Alexander had spent years building walls. Walls made from fear, power, and control. But one person had changed everything. Not with force. Not with influence. Not with money. With kindness. He looked at her hand. The same hand that once carried trays through crowded restaurant halls. The same hand that reached forward when everyone else stepped away. The same hand that saved his mother and changed his life. "You know," Alexander said quietly, "everyone thought you needed me to give you a better life." Sophia looked at him. But they were wrong. His voice softened. "You gave me one." And in that moment, the most powerful man in the city finally understood the truth. The greatest strength was never being feared. It was being loved by someone who saw you for who you truly were. The woman everyone ignored became the reason an entire empire learned compassion. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.